Uchimura is just your average office worker. Every morning, he buries his face in mountains of work, thinking that one day things will get better. But life? Yeah, it's not exactly going as planned. It feels like God himself is teasing him. One day, while walking down the street, a random motorcycle just knocks him over. Seriously, life couldn't be worse. Just when Uchimura thought things couldn't get worse, he dies. Yep, hit by that ant, and bam, lights out. But of course, the story doesn't end there. His bad luck? Oh, it's legendary. The Dark Lord summons him to another world to, you guessed it, work again. So, a few minutes ago, Uchimura found himself in the middle of an important meeting with the 4 strongest beings of the Dark Lord's faction. They were discussing their next move to solidify their power and find someone worthy of filling the spot of the 4 heavenly kings. The meeting gets a little chaotic, and that's when they introduce the key players. First, there's the Tyrant, then the War God Amond, the Earth Guardian Kien, and the Genome Guardian, and last but not least, the Magic Wind Exfit. Everyone's power and influence are impressive, but there's something missing. And that's where Uchimura comes in, the human from another world, who's been chosen to become the vessel of the 4 heavenly kings, specifically to rule over the water element. Now, Uchimura, who was just stabbed to death and is forced to work for the Demon King's army, can't catch a break. He remembers how, since his graduation, he's never stopped working, grinding day in and day out. Society's pressure to make money, to succeed, it's relentless. At first, he thought life would be a dream job, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. His colleagues were constantly getting promoted, while he stayed stuck in the same place, his hardworking nature being overlooked. And in his company, that didn't make things any easier for him. Then, just when things couldn't get worse, he gets transferred to a far-off, underdeveloped country, a place that felt like the graveyard of failed workers. The conditions were tough, with no resources, and even the electricity was spotty. Uchimura had to fight tooth and nail just to make things work, trying to convince the parent company to send more people and equipment, but nobody cared. He kneeled down, begging his colleagues to cooperate and follow his lead, even as things seemed to fall apart. But through sheer determination, Uchimura's work ethic earned him the respect of those around him. And just when he thought things were turning around, the director transferred him again. To a worse place. Seriously? A guy who never gave up, who kept pushing, and now this? It's like the universe is playing a cruel joke on him. And this, right here, is when Uchimura gets hit and ends up summoned by the Dark Lord. The Demon King greets him like an old friend, saying he's been waiting for him for a long time, like Uchimura's death was all part of some master plan to get him here. The king then assigns Uchimura to become the vessel of the 4 heavenly kings. Wait, what? He went from being an overworked, underappreciated employee in his old world to being respected by demons? Uchimura's head is spinning. But the Demon King's not done yet. He pulls out a forbidden book, filled with Uchimura's impressive work resume. The man worked abroad for 5 years, learned the language, led locals to improve their lives, and basically became a legend. According to the book, Uchimura is the perfect candidate to take the throne of the 4 heavenly kings. Now, Uchimura is not exactly thrilled. He didn't sign up for this. Being respected, having an army at his command, and ruling over the water element? That's a lot of pressure. But the Demon King reassures him. Being a 4 heavenly king means getting the same salary and power as the big boss in his old world, plus soldiers to help him, and a comfortable living. No more sleeping on streets or in bushes, like Uchimura's been doing. But here's the catch, Uchimura doesn't have to accept it. If he refuses, the Demon King will just send him back to his old world to start fresh. Uchimura, though, begins to rethink things. Life back there was so competitive, so cutthroat. He was constantly taken advantage of by his colleagues and superiors. The Demon King's offer starts looking better, even though Uchimura's mind is still spinning. Maybe being underrated and underappreciated in this new world is better than getting crushed by the rat race back home. Uchimura? He's not the kind of guy who takes things lying down. Despite the demon's doubts, the Dark Lord could see something special in him. The way things were unfolding, it was clear, if Uchimura served the demon race, it was going to thrive. The Demon Lord promised to harness his full potential. Whether Uchimura got fired or not, that wasn't anyone else's call. His work ethic was something the Lord respected, and he urged Uchimura to strive for the top. But of course, the demons weren't so quick to agree. They immediately objected. Mundar, the tyrant, wasn't impressed. He judged that a weak person couldn't sit at the same table as him. The others, Kien and Exfit, weren't sold either. So, the Dark Lord decided to test Uchimura's abilities before making any decisions. The girl, with her fiery temper, immediately launched an attack, claiming Uchimura must have special powers. Of course, this freaked Uchimura out. Luckily, the Demon Lord stepped in just in time to protect him, or else Uchimura might have been logged out for good. The dragon girl was furious and asked the demon king why he'd stopped her, since Uchimura had fainted from fear. She was ready to attack, but in her anger, she hadn't thought things through. Turns out, she was actually challenging Uchimura, not letting him fight for his life. She was this close to making a huge mistake. This confusion had Kien and Xfit questioning why the demon lord would pick a human to be one of the 4 heavenly kings, especially with all the internal conflicts brewing between the demon and demi-human factions. To them, it seemed like a bad idea. But the demon king knew better. He'd chosen Uchimura for a reason. The young man's ability to handle such conflicts was precisely why he had been summoned. Uchimura woke up to see all the chaos unfolding around him and couldn't help but laugh. He joked about how he couldn't even block a kick, but the demon king wasn't concerned with Uchimura's physical abilities. No, what mattered was his mind, his ability to think strategically and solve problems. So the Dark Lord told him there would be a test. Their territory was about to merge with other regions, and with that would come a lot of conflicts. Uchimura's task? To work with the leaders of the tribes and smooth things over. The first challenge, Minoto Village. Mundar, still in charge of the mission, gave Uchimura the details. She wasn't exactly the best negotiator, and had a reputation for getting under people's skin. But Uchimura had his doubts. He was just a regular guy who'd been thrown into this mess. He was still just trying to get his head around the whole Demon King thing. As he stood in front of the massive Minoto clan chief, he felt the weight of the situation. The chief was enormous, like a buffalo, and Uchimura couldn't help but imagine the worst-case scenario, being killed in the blink of an eye. But there was a bit of hope. Ammon had some conscience, and tried to mediate by asking the chief, Sir Talos, if he was in the mood to talk. But the response? A flat-out refusal. This made the dragon girl furious, and soon, both sides were cursing at each other. Negotiation? Yeah, that was out the window. Uchimura stood there, helpless, watching as they bickered. It was pure chaos. He had never seen such a ridiculous scene in his life. The Minoto clan was initially interested in merging, but now things were a mess. Mander, the dragon girl, wasn't helping. She was cursing people out left and right, making the situation worse. It was a disaster. Uchimura realized that when demons negotiate, it's nothing like what he'd ever experienced. It was just all shouting and aggression. He could barely hear anything through the noise. Still, despite all the tension, Uchimura had to figure out a way to turn things around. Mander had passed him the responsibility, and if he failed, he could be fired, or worse. But the pressure was real. If he didn't succeed, it would be a huge blow to his already bruised ego. Uchimura thought back to his old job, to all the times he'd faced similar frustrations, dealing with people who seemed impossible to please. In his old world, his partner had refused to move forward with deals despite their initial interest. It was a headache, and now it seemed like history was repeating itself, but with even higher stakes. As the meeting dragged on, Ammon went off to inform the Demon King. He wasn't convinced that Uchimura could do anything, but he was looking forward to seeing how the young man would handle it. The next day, Mander couldn't believe what she was seeing. Uchimura walked in with a big grin, looking completely at ease. She had expected a disaster, an utter failure, like her previous negotiation attempts. She imagined a battlefield where the deal had fallen apart. But to her surprise, Uchimura wasn't just surviving the situation, he was thriving. In contrast, Mander's previous attempts had been met with frustration. She had worked hard on negotiations before, but nothing had come of it. She asked him what he did differently. Uchimura simply replied with a grin. Know yourself, know your enemy, and you will win every battle. The next moment, Uchimura led Mander to where the two leaders, Mr. Talos and the Demon King, were shaking hands. It turned out, Mr. Talos had always wanted to cooperate but needed to be reassured of the benefits. The misunderstanding stemmed from a difference in perception. Talos had just wanted the comfort of straw when he slept on the ground, a courtesy of the Minoto tribe to ensure their bodies weren't cold. But Mander, in her rush to fix things, had made the mistake of taking the straw from the people. That's when Uchimura stepped in. With his clear understanding of the situation, he helped both sides see eye to eye. Once the misunderstandings were cleared up, the two leaders were able to shake hands, and peace was restored. Mander, having learned her lesson, realized she hadn't understood the other party's point of view, and that had led to her earlier mistakes. The Demon King, pleased with Uchimura's efforts, praised him and expressed gratitude for his role in resolving the issue. He emphasized that this was the kind of diplomatic skill the Demon clan needed, especially in times of conflict. From now on, Uchimura would be an official member of the 4 Heavenly Kings, honored with a noble bracelet symbolizing his new status. This gave him the freedom to act as he saw fit, without fear of being stopped by anyone. As the ceremony began, Mander finally saw the recognition that had eluded her for so long. She had worked tirelessly, but it was Uchimura's wisdom and unique approach that earned him the recognition of the Demon King. Mander's respect for him grew, and she even shyly reached out to touch his bracelet, a gesture of affection and acknowledgement. Uchimura, still in awe of his new position, couldn't help but laugh. He had gone from being an overworked office worker to a respected figure in the Demon King's army. With his abilities to solve complex problems and bring people together, Uchimura was now at the forefront of the Demon Clan's future. Together, with Mander and the others, they would build a stronger and more unified Demon Clan, just as the Demon King had hoped. A few days later, Uchimura got used to life in another world. Although different in many ways from here, he still had a private office after finding out that the 4 heavenly kings are second only to the Devil King. The hierarchy here is extremely neat, although a bit uneasy, but being valued so highly by the Lord, he thought he had to repay him in every way. His spirits had just lifted a bit when he was scared to death by a group of demons. After that, the young man wanted to go greet the other heavenly kings. The first was the room of a tall and beautiful girl named Xfit. After Men introduced himself, he mentioned he was new. When she took the job, she pretended to be someone else and lied that the owner would be absent for a long time, so she wouldn't be needed anymore. She was fired straight away. He hadn't given up yet. Thinking in business terms, failure is the mother of success, so there's nothing to worry about. Ammon then ran to call his colleague, saying that today the Demon King had something to ask for help, knowing that he was assigned a new mission. Uchimura happily went. This time it was related to negotiations with the Brain Tribe. Their demon army is a newly emerging power, not an ancient one. To confront other great powers, it needs cooperation from all races living in the region, and among the demi-humans, the Brain Tribe has great influence. Their military force can be considered equal to their army, and at the same time, they are the leaders of the surrounding tribes. So they got the nod from the people outside. The Demon King's army would not fear anything anymore. However, the Brain Tribe holds too much military power, which also poses a big danger. If they form an alliance, it will be fine, but if they become enemies, it will be very troublesome, according to the Demon King. In Uchimura's world, this is called a merger negotiation with a competing company. Because of the scale and difficulty of this task, he had never found a suitable person before. But now, the person who knows everything is here, so he asked me to do it, and, at the same time, firmly affirmed that he could be given more spiritual strength. I agreed, and she also agreed to go along as an escort. Otherwise, if a human entered the demon's territory, he would die. She didn't know the reality. She really wanted to follow to learn more and also was in love, so she couldn't let him be in danger. In the name of the 4 heavenly kings, they would try together. Just then, he remembered he wanted to go see the remaining heavenly king, the Earth Guardian Genome. According to the records, that girl in charge of leading the demi-human legion was also under his command, so it was reasonable to ask her. Ammon didn't like that woman, so he made an excuse to prepare the carriage to go somewhere else. He thought it was good to save time. She made a sulky face and asked him to remember to ask quickly. At this time, the demi-human army was being trained properly, so they were extremely surprised by Genome's military skills after the training session. She made comments and praised the soldiers, and from then on, their morale was quite high. Luckily, this little girl was more easygoing and took the initiative to start a conversation. He asked her to come say hello, and wanted to know more information about the Oppa clan. Hearing that, she realized that the main negotiating target was the demons, so she gave him some advice. First of all, the clan leader there is very formidable in both strength and intelligence, not inferior to anyone. He can verify this himself. After arriving at the important place, he should go right away. I see that little dragon girl is getting angry. MH turned back and saw her friend was so aggressive that she asked. She said everything was ready, so, let's go. Hearing that, she teased the other girl a few times, making her so angry that she wanted to scold her but couldn't because this girl was too smart and lowered her ears, pretending not to hear anything. Uchimura saw the two of them like that and felt helpless. After a while, the couple went to see the clan leader. Then they were ignored and made to wait outside for several hours, making Mander annoyed and asking how long they had to wait. The guard forced them to wait until the leader gave permission. Even if he was a heavenly king, he wouldn't even think about coming in. Too arrogant, the dragon girl couldn't control herself. Knowing that, the young man also advised her to be patient and wait more based on experience. Previously, he knew that negotiating with a competing company was very difficult. There was a risk that before he could say anything, he would act without the proper channels, but that was not allowed. She didn't want to listen because that would mean looking down on the Devil King. They were planning to fight to the death, but a girl invited them. From the perspective of the men, he realized some things were wrong in this place. His friend reminded him not to look around, or the Brain clan would notice. The most important thing was not to reveal any weakness. Their power was on par with the enemy that Genome warned them about. Uchimura didn't know what kind of person the opponent was. After entering, he immediately showed off his power and asked Mander to shut up, saying, "I don't allow it yet." Then he added not to open their mouths. Everything must follow his orders. "You are the king of heaven but are being looked down upon like that." She was very angry, but because this is an important task, she tried to restrain herself to solve it before letting them speak. What else did the old man say? Their faction wanted to submit to him. Right? If so, bring the head of the Demon King here. This was not a small insult to the lord they respected. Mander couldn't hold it anymore and was about to curse but was stopped by Uchimura. He smiled and said this matter was too important. He would go home and think about it, and would come back another day. This is called using softness to overcome hardness. If the other party is tough, then you should be gentle and find an opportunity. However, the girl could not bear it, and immediately got angry to vent her anger, cursing that damn old man for daring to insult their king. She wanted to tear him to pieces but was advised to calm down because if she did, then he would have already fallen for the other party's trick. He realized that the old man wanted them to be angry, leading to the negotiation being broken from the beginning. The clan leader had no intention of negotiating but wanted to avoid the people in the clan. He said so he let them in to meet and conveniently blamed them. Luckily, men realized it early when asked if he was uncomfortable. Of course, I respect the Devil King very much, but for a higher goal, he accepted the worst humiliation. If the Brain clan joined hands with other forces to fight against them, it would be tiring. If today did not work, then temporarily retreating would also be fine. Hearing that, the girl also apologized. She didn't understand thoroughly. He didn't blame her, but she had to thank him because if she hadn't gotten angry on his behalf, he would have lost his composure when hearing those words. Suddenly, the girl from earlier came over, introducing herself as the daughter of the clan leader named Ola. Amon also reacted when hearing that, but men asked what she wanted from her. Surprisingly, she asked her to overthrow the throne, leaving the other two confused. They were taken by Ola to the castle's food storage, which was currently unusable due to the faction they were having financial difficulties with. Actually, Uchimura had known since entering there that the soldiers outside had to put on their old armor again. The station was gloomy and lifeless, like the scene of large companies going downhill. The reason is that only one individual manages the whole thing, and when it collapses, it will be impossible to revive it. Olo affirmed that it was true, as he said. Men said that now, if they wanted to save this place, they needed to rely on the Devil's army. However, my father is stubborn and won't listen. He is sick and can't lead like before. Even though he appears strong on the outside, in reality he is old. Now, if my father unfortunately passes away, everything will become chaotic. To avoid that happening, New Ola proposed cooperation. Uchimura heard this and understood but didn't want to act rashly. He also advised her not to tell anyone about what had just happened to avoid being taken advantage of. As the daughter of the leader, she had to be even more careful. Hearing that, she praised him as a good person. At the same time, she said, "I know I'm very confident in my eyes because I trust you, that's why I invited you here to talk." By the way, she held my hand and begged me to marry her. If Uchimura becomes the new clan leader, all problems will definitely be solved. He was so shocked. Mander was jealous and said this was too sudden. But Ola didn't listen and still went ahead because this was the best way to solve the problem. And so, the young man was pressed down and prepared to have sex that night. When she kissed him, Emon stopped her. She tried to stay calm and asked permission to go home and discuss more. The next day, Uchimura had a headache about this incident. The patriarch refused to negotiate, and his daughter went in an unimaginable direction. This time, he brought himself into the inner world to find a solution. It was still the same familiar restaurant as last time. Here, the owner had an argument with Amond about whether the lion or the chimpanzee is stronger. Each person has their own idea, but the lion has great pride, completely different from the other animals. This sentence helped Uchimura immediately break the deadlock. He called his friend and said she had thought of a way to negotiate. Amond was very happy to hear that, so he ran over. He thought he would meet the old man from the other day, but men said they would go somewhere else. On the way, he would tell his colleagues to take it slow. About a week later, they were called by the clan leader, who angrily asked why his allied clans were being supported and they weren't. It turned out that last week, Uchimura and Olo had called for a few surrounding tribes to be on their side because everyone was in dire straits, so it was easy to negotiate. Plus, the chief's daughter stood up to support everything, which helped everything move in the right direction. This was a strategy to seek big contracts on Earth. If No comes to invite big companies to buy goods, he will definitely be fired if he doesn't persuade smaller businesses around to purchase before going to the big company. Full of pride, the big company would then personally want to come to ask. The first step of the plan was considered a success. Uchimura continued to talk more about the current situation, joining the army of the Demon King, which will ensure that the lives of the surrounding tribes are emotionally affected. He started to get out of the net, so he laughed because in this battle, whoever loses their temper will lose. As soon as he punched, Uchimura immediately soothed the pain. Calling Olu, she acted as an intermediary to connect the other tribes to join the side of the little Demon King. He was very sad to see his father like that. His top priority now was the lives and future of everyone. The world had changed, and his dad was not as strong as before. From the past until now, she had always respected him and considered him a source of pride. The dad who was considered a champion was now too fake, so now was the time to cooperate and find a new road. Uchimura added a call. They didn't need to merge anymore, but the relationship would be as allies, so there was no fear of losing face when having to serve under someone else. He still respected the brave leader of the lions. The patriarch needed time to think, but in reality, he was covering up his weakness. The incident was a complete success, making everyone happy to see their daughter grow up. This father was also satisfied. A few days later, Manda reported that the other side had accepted the deal. He was currently facing a disaster. The Demon King allowed overseas officials to find subordinates, but he didn't know what to do or who to choose now. The Dragon Girl said to just choose randomly. Then he said he liked working with someone like her, which made her happy. It sounded like a confession, and he asked if Uchimura wanted to be her life partner. While mulling over this, oh my gosh! He went to greet them to prove the friendship of the clan that sent her here to work. Hearing that, Uchimura invited her to his department. Of course, she agreed because she liked him very much. In addition, she was also grateful for the present. Now that her father had handed over power to the talented people in the clan, there would be a big change coming that she couldn't describe. Amanjinin was so angry that he didn't even want to shake hands with them again, calling both sides competitors, so he didn't want them to act too familiar. Seeing the lady leading Uchimura, he also tried to find a way to coax